Welcome to the World Wire Update. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for more updates and thrilling short scenes. In 2025, President Trump's second term ushers in a far more aggressive America First trade strategy, one that targets not just traditional rivals like China, but also America's closest allies in ways not seen before. Suddenly, the very nations that have stood shoulder to shoulder with the US for decades find themselves in the crosshairs of sweeping new trade policies. Long-standing partners like Japan, South Korea, and the EU now face steep tariffs and are pressured to make massive investments in the US, fundamentally altering the nature of their alliances and economic ties. The administration's approach is less about fair trade and more about extracting economic concessions, forcing allies to subsidize American reindustrialization, regardless of the cost to their own economies. In July, a new wave of tariffs hits 14 countries, including a staggering 50% tariff on copper and a 25% baseline for Japan and South Korea, sending shockwaves through global markets and rattling investors worldwide. Even the BRICS Bloc, which has often positioned itself as a counterweight to Western influence, faces a standing threat of a 10% tariff, fueling global uncertainty and deepening resentment among emerging economies. The goal is clear: force foreign companies to relocate factories and supply chains to the US, even as domestic labor shortages and strict anti-immigrant policies make this transition far more complicated than anticipated. America's partners are left questioning the reliability of the US as a stable economic leader, and some begin to quietly explore new alliances and trade routes to reduce their dependence on Washington. This high-stakes trade gambit is rapidly reshaping global economic relationships, pushing allies into uncharted territory and setting the stage for a new era of uncertainty in the world economy. Japan is hit especially hard, as the global economic landscape shifts and new pressures mount on its already fragile recovery. The country is pressured into a lopsided trade deal that imposes a punishing 15% tariff on its exports to the US, threatening the backbone of its manufacturing sector. The agreement goes even further, forbidding Japan from retaliating in any way. This strips Tokyo of crucial leverage, leaving its industries exposed and at the mercy of unpredictable US policy decisions. As part of the deal, Japan must invest a staggering $550 billion directly into the US by 2029, a forced capital injection that bypasses market logic and is dictated by political necessity. Despite this massive outflow of capital, the US retains 90% of the cash flows from these investments, with ultimate control resting firmly in the hands of the White House and American policymakers. Critics call it a protection racket. Japan is forced to pay for the privilege of its security alliance, all while living under the constant threat of even harsher tariffs if it dares to resist or negotiate. Japanese companies now face a stark and painful choice: absorb the tariffs and lose their competitiveness in global markets, or move production to the US, hollowing out their domestic industry and risking the loss of jobs and expertise at home. The deal sows deep distrust, turning what was once a partnership into a relationship defined by dominance, submission, and growing resentment on both sides. Japan's economic sovereignty is under direct threat, and its future as a reliable US ally is now clouded by uncertainty and doubt. The US trade deal sparks a political crisis in Japan, with public outrage and opposition forcing Prime Minister Ishiba to resign. The 15% tariff, later threatened to rise to 25%, devastates key industries like autos and electronics, eroding profit margins and competitiveness. Companies scramble to diversify away from the US market, accelerating plans to invest elsewhere. The $550 billion forced investment drains resources from research, infrastructure, and innovation at home. Public trust in the US-Japan alliance collapses, replaced by resentment and skepticism. The alliance, once the cornerstone of Japanese policy, is now seen as a source of economic subjugation. Politicians and business leaders openly debate alternatives, questioning whether Japan is too dependent on an unreliable partner. The crisis is pushing Japan to reconsider its place in the world and seek new paths forward. Japan faces a defining choice: remain a diminished US ally absorbing economic pain, or pivot toward greater autonomy and new partners. The alternative is to diversify economic and political ties, especially with the expanding BRICS Bloc and the Asian economic sphere. This path offers escape from US pressure, but risks new tensions and requires a fundamental foreign policy shift. The Trump administration's unpredictability has made the US seem unreliable, fueling calls for strategic hedging. The idea of joining a multipolar world order is gaining traction among Japan's leaders. The national conversation now centers on whether the US alliance is worth the economic cost. Can Japan thrive while tethered to a protectionist America, or is it time to embrace Asia's rise? The decision will shape Japan's future and could accelerate the global shift away from US dominance. As Japan weighs its options in a rapidly changing world, the BRICS bloc emerges as a powerful and increasingly influential alternative on the global stage. Once just 5 emerging economies, BRICS has now expanded to include 10 full members and up to 20 partner countries, representing over half the world's population and a vast share of global resources. The expanded bloc now accounts for more than 40% of global GDP by purchasing power, making it a true economic powerhouse that rivals the influence of traditional Western economies. BRICS is actively building its own financial system, challenging US dollar dominance and creating robust alternatives to Western-led institutions like the IMF and World Bank. The bloc's innovative multi-currency system, supported by China's CIPS network, allows members to bypass the US dollar and SWIFT, shielding them from US sanctions and giving them greater control over their financial destinies. This new infrastructure is highly attractive to countries seeking independence from Washington's economic pressure, offering a path to more balanced and equitable global trade. BRICS is no longer just a discussion forum. It's a credible counterweight to the Western-led order, shaping the future of international cooperation and economic policy. For Japan, the bloc offers a unique chance to reclaim economic sovereignty, diversify its partnerships, and join a new center of global power that is redefining the rules of the game. BRICS promises Japan a more stable, predictable economic environment, free from US coercion. The bloc's principles of mutual respect and non-interference contrast sharply with Washington's demands. De-dollarization is a central draw. By trading in national currencies, Japan could reduce its vulnerability to US financial pressure. This would open access to a vast market, free from the threat of US sanctions or blocked transactions. Other US allies are already moving in this direction. India deepens ties with China, while South Korea and the EU seek strategic autonomy. The BRICS New Development Bank offers financing without the political strings of the IMF or World Bank. For Japan, partnering with BRICS could unlock new opportunities in infrastructure and technology across emerging economies. The global trend is clear. Nations are diversifying away from US dominance, and Japan is poised to follow. Trump's protectionism and the rise of BRICS are accelerating a seismic shift in the global order. The US-led alliance system is fracturing, as allies are pushed away and new partnerships form in resistance to American pressure. Japan, long tied to the US, now faces unprecedented challenges and opportunities. The rapprochement between India and China shows that shared economic interests can override old rivalries. For Japan, the future likely means balancing its US security alliance with deeper integration into Asia and BRICS. This pivot is now a strategic necessity, not just a choice. Ironically, America's hardline tactics may have catalyzed the rise of a powerful alternative to its own leadership. Japan's next move could mark the end of unchallenged US dominance and the dawn of a truly multipolar world.